guys, today we're taking a look at a Polaroid Model 95. I bought this in an antique store for $23. When they were new, they cost $89.75. On eBay, they're worth between $20 and $50. The condition of this one is pretty good, except the pop-up viewfinder, which is right here, had a glass broken. So I replaced it with a piece of clear plastic so that it would look good from 10 feet away. But if you actually look through it, it's a blurry mess without the proper lens in there. So other than the broken piece of glass there, this one is in pretty good condition. The personal significance to a Polaroid 95 was my mom had one very similar to this in the early 60s, and hers was a newer model with plastic instead of aluminum, but I probably took a picture or two with it. It was a fascinating device at the time. A little bit of history. Over a span of 60 years, Polaroid made three types of cameras. The first series from 1948 to 1963 were roll film cameras. And from 63 to 72, they made pack film cameras. And then after 72, till they quit operation in 2008, they made integral film cameras where the cartridge and everything just worked like magic. That's the classic Polaroid SX70. So the Model 95 has its own piece of history because it was the very first Polaroid, and it was made in 1948. The Model 80, which is its little brother, was made in 1954. And that's basically the same as this, except smaller. The film has not been available for many years. For the 95, they used to take type 42 and 47 film. Type 42 was 400 speed, and type 47 would be 3000 speed. From 1948 to 53, while this model was made, this is the big brother to the Model 80, made in 1954. This one takes 3 1/4 by 4 1/4 pictures, whereas the smaller little brother, which was introduced many years later, took 2 1/2 by 3 1/4 pictures and was almost a pound lighter. They sold 950,000 of these. The 95 was the first camera, and they made 1.5 million Model 95s if you consider the 95, the 95A, and the 95B. Here's a fun fact. Following the bankruptcy, the new owners, PLR IP Holdings, on January 5th, 2010, Polaroid appointed Lady Gaga as the creative director for the company. Here's another fun fact. There was even a Russian copy of this. I'll show you a picture of that. The features of the 95 was covered with a brown vinyl, which actually is, they did a very good job. As old as this camera is, the vinyl is in wonderful condition. This requires a number 200 flash gun, which mounts on the cold flash. You couldn't put a wink light on these because they don't have an X-Sync. The models 95A and B do have an X-Sync, and they would take a number 252 wink light, which is different than the other wink lights because the bracket here is different and the connections are different on the newer model Polaroids. So the 95s need a special wink light, and again, the original 95 can't do a wink light at all. The scale for exposure is an LV scale numbered 1 through 8, and the original model had a 135 millimeter lens f11 with a 4-speed shutter from 1/8 of a second to 1/60th of a second, plus a bulb setting. The M-Sync flash bulbs are on the front, and it also takes a cable release socket. This focuses from infinity to 3.5 feet, and its unique thing about the Model 95 is with the viewfinder, it has what they call a ball and mast parallax compensation, and this is the mast. So when you focus through the lens, through the viewfinder, you put this chrome ball at the end at the center of your picture. But if you want to compensate for parallax compensation when your image is closer, then you use the red bar, which isn't much of a change, but it's all you need because you really can't get closer than 3 1/2 feet anyhow. The differences between the models, this is the original. The 95A, which is the second model, uses a 130 millimeter lens instead of a 135 millimeter lens, and it's f8.8 instead of f11. And the shutter speeds changed to 1/12th of a second to 1/100th of a second, whereas the first one was 1/8th of a second to 1/60th of a second. And they added X-Sync, so you could use a wink flash then, and it had an extra connector on the top of the lens board for that X-Sync. Instead of the ball and mast focus point and parallax compensation, the model 95A and B used a pull-out frame, which looks kind of like more, I'll say, modern cameras of the early era. And it had a film release switch instead of a push button. In the Model B, 95B, the last of the series of the 95s, they changed from using a light value to an exposure value, an EV setting. The original light value, the numbers were 1 to 8, and the newer models, starting with the 95B, the exposure value goes from 10 to 17. And those high numbers reflect the fact that you had really 3,000 speed film. They added extra light seals also on the later models because of the high-speed film. Let's take a look at the top of the camera. I'll collapse this first. So here we have an accessory shoe. It's not the same as a standard cold shoe. It's close. I was able to put a flash unit in it, but it's not really quite the same. And it's made for a special flash gun. This is the flip-up viewfinder, which flips up beautifully. If mine hadn't been bashed and broken the glass lens at the front, it would be in good shape. And lastly, on the top, you just have a strap lug. Not much to see on the top. On the bottom, again, there's another flash lug, and there's a 1/4-20 tripod socket. And when I bought mine, it came with this little Polaroid timer, which is kind of handy. It goes, well, the smallest setting is about 5 seconds right there. If I click the button, it'll time down to 5 seconds. Now, it doesn't ding or anything at the end. Perhaps they did when they were new. It also goes up to 2 minutes, and it works. If I set that to 120 seconds, it's pretty accurate. And it just screws in the tripod socket. Wasn't that clever? Now let's look at the front of the camera. That's where things start to get interesting. This is the front cover latch, 1/4x20 tripod socket. This is the loading latch, which goes open like that and close. We'll show that in a minute. And then this is the flip-up stand for when you set it upright. So if you open it like this, then you would want to open up this stand so that it can stand up upright like that. To open the lens, you just grab the center portion bottom and pull it out till it snaps, like that. And this is the focusing rail over here, marked off in feet, and it's an infinity nail. You push the button down, and there's little detents all along here, so you can set it at what it would call exactly 6 feet or 3.5 feet. And you have to be sure whenever you close this that you have it back at infinity, otherwise it'll jam up if you try and close it. The interesting thing about the flip-up holder here, the flip-up stand, is that on the newer model Polaroids, newer than 95s, they have serial numbers there. The serial number's not on that part. In fact, the serial number's back in the plastic, I think. I'm not even sure of it. So this is the exposure setting window, and again, it's numbered from 1 to 8. This is the flash bulb sync socket. Again, a flash bulb, not an electronic flash. Just above the lever for the shutter is a little threaded socket for cable release. And this is the shutter button. And it's It's a release and charge type. It's like your old-fashioned Kodak. You just take it like that and it snaps and takes a picture. And you can do it over and over again. So you could take double exposures if you wanted to. There's nothing can stop it. And this is the switch for instant or bulb. Of course, instant is just normal shutter speeds, which are set by the exposure dial. And then that's your bulb setting. So if you click that, the lens stays open until you release it. The interesting thing is it also resets it back to instant position. So it doesn't stay in bulb. If you put it in bulb, you take one picture and it goes back to instant pictures. And to close this, again, you have to make sure that your focus is set back to infinity. There's a spring, black spring thing in the front. You just push that with your finger. It releases from this tab right here. And then you can push it all the way back. And you just push down on these two chrome bars and it'll fold up nicely. And click. On the top side is the camera strap and a hinge for the door. And on the bottom side is the loading latch and the film cutter bar. The film cutter bar just snaps in and out. It's free to use like that. On the camera back, we have the viewfinder window if it was popped up. And the film access door. And this is the access door lever to open it. And this is the release button for the film. So let's talk about the way you load this camera. You open this lever here, and it's interesting that it's got like two positions. That's where it pops to, but you can also push it further to the left, which comes interesting later. So when it's in, once you open it, you can just pull this open like that. And if you go to close it, it doesn't really lock. Even if you did this, it's not, well, let's make a liar out of me. If it's in the middle position, see, that's not locked. You have to push it that way to make sure the lever gets underneath it. Push in, and then it grabs it. It's a little tricky, but it's obvious too after you do it a couple times. At any rate, if we open this, you open it wide like that, and they always tell you to make sure the rollers are clean. So you would want to make sure these rollers get clean. They get messed up from the chemicals. You can open it like this, and there's another roller here. So when you get your film, there's two spools. There's the negative and the positive rolls, and then there's a leader line. So you sort of spread it out. The big roll goes in here. The little roll snaps into this cartridge, or these two little clips. And you want to snap that in, pull it over a little bit, pop the other roll in there. The leader goes out here. Then you close that door down. Then you fold it back over this way. And you close this on it like that. And again, you lock it in. Then there should be an exposed piece out here, and you pull it till it stops. Push this down, and then you have to hold this with your finger while you rip it off. They call this a cutter bar, but it's so dull it doesn't cut, it just rips. At that point in time, you're actually ready to take your first picture. Now, if you had the lens out and you pushed the button and took a picture, nothing's going to happen yet because you have a negative and a positive. It's just been exposed. So then, when you take your picture and you have this piece of leader just sticking out there and you want to pull it, first you have to push this button to release it. Then you pull it out and rip it off and wait your minute. It'll automatically lock when it comes to the next thing because there's a detent and this thing catches it. After you've waited 1 minute, you open this door and there will be your picture in there, and you peel it off and it's got perforations, and they warn you not to touch not to touch it while it's developing. And the kit comes with a tube that you coat it with like a fixer afterwards. And after you've waited the 1 minute and peeled it off, it should be developed, and you'll see your picture right away. I'll show some pictures from the manual showing these steps. At any rate, it sure is a pretty camera when you get it all set up. Polaroid did a terrific job on the vinyl wrap. Looks nice. It weighs a ton. Thanks a lot for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video.